What's going on, guys? My name is Tim Roswick, and today I wanted to talk about one of the core things that I think makes a great indie game. And if you were using these concepts that I'm about to talk about in your design, I think you're going to end up with an awesome game, no matter what genre or type of game you pick, because I feel like some of these concepts are so critical, yet they're often looked over. Like, I know a lot of us as indie game developers, me especially, being self-taught, when we go on Google, when we learn stuff, we don't always learn everything that we need to know to make games, right? Like, sometimes we learn the technical stuff, or we learn how to program, or we learn all this different stuff, but we don't actually learn some of the design-centric things that come with game development. So what I want to talk about today was choosing your core principles for your game. And this is something that I did with Phylophobia, and as I've made more and more games, I've started to realize how important this is because I never used to do it. So what I mean by choosing core principles is you need to figure out what your game is about. You need to figure out the theme, like the world that the game exists in, right? The mechanics, the things that you do in that game, and the story, like the events that happen in that world with those mechanics. You have to figure those three things out, but you also have to rank them in order of importance. And why does this matter? Well, let's say if you make a game, let's say about a boy lost in the woods, right? That's the theme. He's in the woods. It's a dark, woody area. It's crazy. There's animals running around. He's scared. The story takes place in those woods, and it's about his journey through the woods back home. And the mechanics, let's say there's no shooting. He just has to kind of avoid wolves, set up traps, survive, stuff like that. Now, this game, this theoretical fictional game that we just made up, can go a couple different ways. If mechanics is at the top of that list, right, then you were going to spend a ton of time playtesting the different traps that go into the game. You were going to spend a ton of time working on the movement and the jump system. You're going to spend a ton of time working on the enemies. You're going to make this game so beautiful and amazing mechanic-wise that it's going to be awesome. Matter of fact, this game is going to be so fun mechanically that you can play the same game with just cubes on a white screen, and it's going to be fun. That's one iteration of the game. Excuse me. Second iteration would be, I don't know, story. Let's pick story. Let's say story is the most important out of everything else. Not to say you'll spend less time on the mechanics or working on those things, but you will spend a ton of time on issues that someone subscribed to me on YouTube. I forgot to mute the notifications. You will spend a ton of time on issues that are important to the story. You spend a ton of time on like triggered events and things that really take into account the interactions that the player has, how they're feeling, the mood, the setting. You'll take into account, you'll do all sorts of like triggered event sequences that happen in game. You might even approach the game similar to a Telltale game, right? Whereas a mechanics-based game could end up like any number of platformers out there. A story-based game with the same concept could end up like a Telltale game, like any one of the story-based games that they've got out there. So that's a second iteration, but a third iteration too would be setting and all that, and really putting emphasis in the world. And you might pick a unique art style. You might go something like Limbo, or something like really unique that like is immediately identifiable, and you'll spend a lot of time in that. So you see how those three things, depending on what you focus on, which one is more important, what your top core principles are, you would make different decisions on how you interact with the game. And so I personally like to rank these in order of kind of what I think is important. And for Phylophobia specifically, my game that I'm working on, in case you're new to the channel, it's about a dude that breaks up with his girlfriend, or his girlfriend breaks up with him, and he commits suicide. So he goes to hell, and hell is basically haunting him with love. That's why it's called Phylophobia, the fear of love. And my order of importance is story, theme, and then mechanics. It's in that order. So what that means is when I come up with a really cool idea for a mechanic or for an enemy or for a gadget is what I call anything that the player can interact with. When I come up with a cool idea for those things, if they don't, like if the enemies, for example, if I can't make them into a heart somehow, they don't make it in the game. Some of the gadgets, some of the interactive objects, if I can't figure out a way to make them fit in with the theme or the story of the game, they don't make it in. I prototype a lot. I built a lot of different stuff, but a lot of stuff gets cut specifically because story is the most important thing. And another decision that I've made with the game that I end up making that comes up a lot on stream, people ask me about a lot, is they say the game is similar to Super Meat Boy. Like, it's really hard, it's instant restart, it's that kind of thing. But they ask me why I end up cutting some of the harder levels. And the reason is, any level that takes more than 5 or 10 minutes to complete, because they're single screen experiences, any level that takes more than 5 to 10 minutes to complete is a barrier to the story, right? Like, maybe you can experience the theme a little bit with that, being haunted by demonic hearts in hell, but being stopped from progressing with the difficulty of a level is going to stop you from experiencing the story. And I think the story is the most important thing in my game. It's the order hierarchy of my principles that I think is so important. And I don't want anything to stop the player from experiencing the story. Not to say I'm going to make the game super easy, but I'm definitely going to take story into an account when I'm making levels. And any level that is above a certain difficulty threshold, it's not going to get cut from the game, but it's going to be put into a unlockable pack after the campaign, similar to like some of the Mario World games. So I think it's really important that you understand the order of importance of those principles. And there are a lot more principles like that. There are a lot more design principles you can add into your game, but those are just 3 that I like to really think about: the theme, the mechanics, and the story. And I really try and rank those in order of importance. Now, they're all very important, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if you're focusing on a story, just forget mechanics and don't work on any of that, or mechanics, fuck the story, fuck the art, the theme, all that. That's not what I'm saying. They're all very, very important, and you should give them plenty of time because they need plenty of time to kind of build on and iterate on. But I'm just saying, when it comes down to choosing between something like mechanics or theme, or mechanics and story, or difficulty and story, something like that, you need to have an answer. You need to know what your game is by design, an order of hierarchy of those principles, because if you don't, you can end up with a really haphazard experience. You can end up with a kind of a jumbled experience. And that's something that I've really been learning designing Phalophobia, is that like the more that I kind of flesh out my design principles and my pillars of what I'm kind of designing, the more consistent my experience kind of tends to feel. So that's all I got for you today. I wanted to share it with you. If you got any tips for kind of organizing what's important to your game, or kind of getting this kind of stuff out on paper, leave it down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys as always. But once again, I'm Tim Ruswick, and I will see you again tomorrow.